Okay, for some of the cases that we have here, we've had to sort of, if you will, build our own cases or our trunks for certain equipment. And we realized that, I'm sure probably most of you have, if you're trying to find a case for your equipment, let's say for certain kind of speakers or for a console, and it's not made, that you'll have to get another console case designed for a totally different console, and then you'll have to put a bunch of foam in it, shock foam specifically, to sort of build out a case for your equipment. And I'm going to use, we have a mixer, an Allen Heath mixer that we had to do this with. We had to get a bunch of this shock foam. And if you've ever felt it or used it, it's not very hard, but it's hard enough that it can definitely take an impact without splitting. But the shock foam, which is what it's really designed to do, can take a great amount of hit without coming apart. So let's take a look at that Allen Heath case, and I'll give you an example. Okay, with the mixer out of the case, we can see a lot better how it was set up. Now, we'll say this case actually is sort of get an idea of how thick it is. Let's see here. Yeah, you can get an idea really of how tall, if you will, the case was. This case that we're using for the Allen Heath was originally designed for a Behringer X32. Now the X32 and this Allen Heath at the GL2400, obviously those are different sizes. So what we did here, actually let me point it out here real quick, sort of what was standard. Like these here were all standard. These were not installed by me. What we ended up doing was there were square pieces right over here, and let's see if we can get on the other side here, and right over here. What we ended up doing was notching out these corners so that the Allen Heath could fit in there. So that it would rest down where the faders are, that everything would be at wrist level. And what we ended up doing was putting these other shock foam here, and these are actually not quite as dense as what they have here, but still is very functional. So we ended up putting this shock foam in here, and that was to keep the back of the Allen Heath up. Okay, then for the lid, because this doesn't fit the Allen Heath, what we ended up doing was adding these sections right here. There's actually two of them. And what this does, that's on the lid, when the lid goes on, when it comes down on the console, these hold the console in place from the rear. And where these shock foam is, well, you can see it here on the bottom, but where the shock foam is here on the bottom, that keeps the corners in place. So just because they don't make a console case for your board doesn't mean that you can't use an existing case from something else. You can tell where the edge of the console fits down into that notch area. This is the base of it, and over here as well, we've got it down in that notched area right here. So the thing to know about getting cases for consoles is make sure that the case that you are getting is going to be bigger than the console itself. 2 inches over here. There's 2 inches on this side over here. There's probably about another maybe 3 inches in the back. So you're going to have to end up getting the case larger than what you need, because you're going to have to put all the foam in it to make sure that when everything's together on the case that it is stable during transport. Okay, and the F that you may see on a lot of our cases just indicates that that is the front of the case. So looking at the F, we know that this is how the case needs to be oriented, just so that it fits properly and it holds the console in the case during transport. This RCF trunk is just a generic trunk that we got, and just the same as what we do with the occasional console cases, we do end up setting up the trunk for the same thing. We've got shock foam sitting in here that helps with the transport of the powered speakers. All right, when we got this trunk, it was completely empty. All it had was, it's this, it's sort of like a shock foam, the sides, even the top of it here, the surface area things. It's actually not bad, but the whole thing was completely empty. So we've added this shock foam here, here, any place that you see in here. We've added the shock foam. In fact, here, let me turn it around. Maybe you can see the, I think with the light in here, that may be a little bit hard to see. But right down here in front, we've got more shock foam lining this side of it over here. So the shock foam was all installed here to match the geometry of the speakers. Now this cabinet, pardon me, this trunk here is quite a bit bigger than what the speakers are themselves. But we needed to have room to place these, if you will, these pressure point areas where the speakers could hit if something were to occur, like if the case were to roll away and hit something. Now, setting up your own trunk for speakers, or for whatever it is that you need to be in a safe and secure environment, it's not hard to do the work. It's just very time consuming, because you're going to have to get your shock foam, stick stuff up here, do measurements, see where the pressure points are, and then end up gluing the shock foam on. I'm going to make sure I get glue all the way to the edges. You don't want any lips forming on here, because eventually that will cause it to pull away from the like from the side, and including on the floor. It can cause it to pull away. It's something to note, not all trunks or console cases have this type of foam on them, on the lid, around the sides. If your case that you're looking at does not have that, I highly recommend you getting some foam and putting it in here. It does add another layer of protection when you're transporting it. This stuff on the floor, it's glued down, and it provides support for the bottom speaker, the back of the bottom speaker, which what it does is that it keeps the speaker sort of level, the bottom speaker level, which allows us to put the second speaker on top, which makes it a lot easier to stack these in here and have the front of the speaker pushed up against these, which I'll show you here in just a minute. Okay, with the first cabinet in, as you can tell, it is it's right up against these front shock foam bumpers. It's got a little bit of room here in the back, which will show you how we secure that in the back. Okay, what we have here, which we keep around, some of these spare shock foam. And what this does is it allows us to place a temporary support in trunks to stop things from moving around. And this is pretty solid in here. It's not going to go anywhere. And what it does is that it allows us to, when we remove the shock foam, we can easily get our hands, arms around the equipment and pull stuff out. Now, if this if this trunk was smaller, it actually would be a little bit more difficult to pull a speaker out of here because we have to reach back behind here to get it, and we reach in front. So as long as we have enough room, we can get something out, we can pull it out. But what this does is this temporarily holds it in place during transport. Okay, here we have a spacer. We use this to rest the other speaker on top of it, and that's really just so that it doesn't cause any marking or scrapes on the bottom speaker. Okay, that second speaker just fits right on top. Okay, you can tell the front of the speaker is now right up against the shock foam up the top here. And okay, if we look forward here, you can tell we've got the opening right here. We're just going to put temporary shock foam down there, just like we did on the bottom speaker. Okay, and that's going to hold it in position. Okay, now for the lid, so you notice we don't have anything on this lid. What we do is, there we go. What we do, we have another temporary foam. So once we get all the stuff and speakers and stuff, pardon me, but the cables, the cabling, once that stuff gets sitting in there, we'll just sit a temporary piece of the shock foam in here. So that when we close the lid, now there is some resistance, I mean you can't tell just by looking at it. There is some resistance in here, but it is enough that it keeps downward pressure on the speakers to help keep them in place. So this is it's a power cable that connects the speakers together if we're going to use two of them. And we've got these are the power, if we're going to run them individually, individual power cables. And also, which I think you saw here when we took it out, these are supports that go on the back of the speaker to help tilt the speakers either up or down at front of house. So we basically have left this this area sort of open here until I can sort of get a better idea of how I want to do this, because I'm not too sure if I want to keep something up here permanent. I think you guys get the idea. The whole thing is just making sure that that however you have stuff sitting in here, it needs to be secured. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Hope this helps.